I'd now like to introduce our guest speaker, Robert Kelly. Robert's the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of New York Mellon Corporation. I'm particularly pleased to have Robert with us today as this year's commencement speaker. Given the spotlight that's been put on the banking industry, it's both timely and relevant to hear from a person that's running one of the most respected global financial services companies in the world. And I might add that passed the Fed's stress test with flying colors. I'm sure you will benefit from his point of view regarding where we are in today's business cycle, as well as the skills that graduates will need to build successful careers. Now, a bit of background on Robert. He served as Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Mellon Financial Corporation from 2006 until its merger with the Bank of New York. Today, Bank of New York Mellon has more than $20 trillion in assets under custody and administration and has $928 billion under management. And it operates in over 100 markets worldwide. Prior to joining Mellon, he spent 5 years as the CFO of Wachovia Corporation, and before that, he was at Toronto Dominion Bank for nearly 2 decades as a vice chairman and head of the retail and commercial bank. Among his many awards and distinctions, Robert was named Top 10 Bank CEO in 2006 and 2007 by U.S. Banker magazine. While he was the Chief Financial Officer of Wachovia, Robert was named one of America's Best CFOs in 2004, 2005, and 2006. This year, Institutional Investor magazine named Robert as one of America's Best CEOs. Robert has an MBA and an honorary doctorate from Cass Business School, City University in London. He also holds an honorary doctorate from St. Mary's University in Canada. He's a member of the Financial Services Forum, the Partnership for New York City, and the Federal Advisory Council of the Federal Reserve Board. He's also an important member of the Carnegie Mellon University Board of Trustees. Please join me in welcoming Robert Kelly.
Well, thank you, Dean. I really much appreciate that. And it's a real pleasure to be here today. And probably a lot of you have already forgotten some of the things the Dean said. But in terms of his advice, if you can get a hard copy of that, probably once a year you should take a read of it. I think it's pretty good. Congratulations to all the graduates first. Well done. And of course, congratulations to all the moms and dads and spouses out there too. Also well done. It's been said that commencement speeches were invented largely on the belief that outgoing students, before they graduate, have to be thoroughly and properly sedated. So with this in mind, I've tailored my remarks so that you'll wake up just about the time that the economy turns around, okay? I have the honor of managing the oldest bank in America, which I'm incredibly proud of, and I've been very fortunate. On June 9th, next month, BNY Mellon will be 225 years old. It was started by Alexander Hamilton, who was an immigrant, and the first Secretary of the Treasury, and the guy on the $10 bill. It also made the first loan to the U.S. government to help repay the Revolutionary War debts. It produced the 49th and longest-serving Secretary of the Treasury, and a Pittsburgh native, Andrew Mellon. And today, in the midst of the deepest recession, certainly in my lifetime, we've been profitable every quarter. We have the best debt ratings in the United States. We have lots of capital to grow and continue to service our clients around the world, and we're doing our part to bring our country back to health. Beginning of last year, we were the 10th largest financial institution in the United States as measured by market capitalization. We've done very poorly, and we're now the 5th largest financial institution in the United States. The point is, our bank was able to grow, thrive, and survive in economic booms, economic downturns, recessions, depressions, technology changes, mergers, acquisitions, and upheavals. The point also is, so will you. And that's the good news. America's had 11 recessions since the Second World War. This recession will end too. And it's not a guess, it's just a fact. It will happen. And so don't sweat it. We're definitely coming out of this recession. We're starting to see some hints of some better economic news, and you're probably as aware of that as I am. But over the next year, I would expect that housing prices will eventually bottom out. I would hope that the unemployment rate will peak. And I would also expect that you're going to start seeing some GDP growth, probably this fall. So probably the worst of the bad, ugly stuff is behind us. But let's hope so, knock on wood. However, America has what the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board would call imbalances. Imbalances is kind of like economist language for really big, very scary, really bad stuff. And I'll go through the list of these at the threat, of course, and the risk of you falling asleep on me or just bursting into tears, which I do sometimes. But think about huge trade deficits, huge budgetary deficits, a debt-to-GDP ratio growing from 40% to 57% by the end of this year. And it could be worse if we don't do some pro-business stuff in this country. In contrast, by the way, the Canadian debt-to-GDP ratio is 20%. Consumers haven't saved for 20 years, and they've over-levered, and they're going to have to de-lever. We're too dependent upon foreign oil. We have a residential mortgage product and process that is totally broken in the United States, and it needs to be fixed. And it's probably the worst in the English-speaking world. And given that it's a $10 trillion market, we should probably fix it. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. I don't know if you know that. We operate in 38 countries. And until the middle of last year, the United States had the second worst of all of those countries. And number one was Japan. Well, last year we replaced Japan, and we now have the highest tax rate in the world. That is not a good thing. And of course, we also have had multiple federal administrations that have been completely unable and presumably unwilling to solve the looming and gigantic issues of the health care reform and Social Security reform. So, the bad news is these imbalances are going to have a real medium-term impact on GDP growth, on competitiveness of us versus the rest of the planet, which is really, really key. And it's also going to have some impact on employment. You should be really angry about that. Seriously. We baby boomers have screwed it up on you, and we got some fixing that we got to do. The good news is that every one of these issues is solvable, every one of them. And you are going to have to help solve them. By the way, it'd be great if you could do that right after this ceremony. It really isn't rocket science. This is going to take leadership. It's going to have to take the ability to make really hard decisions, and it's going to have to take a lot of will to see them through. This is what we need right now, and this is what we need in our future leaders. So I'm going to draw a small parallel. I entered the workforce in 1975, 34 incredibly short years ago, in a small town in eastern Canada, right in the middle of a really big recession, not quite as big as this one, but a really ugly one. There was a major stock market downturn, and there was really high inflation in that period. I honestly, looking back on it, I honestly don't recall it as being bad. In fact, I had a lot of fun in the 70s. Although I did and still hate disco music. What did I care about during my career? I basically only cared about three things, seriously. The first one was I thought it was really important that I get a good education. So I did the undergrad thing, and I did the MBA thing, and I got a chartered accountancy and all that sort of stuff. And, of course, it was more fun than working. But I thought at the margin, if I was competing against someone, I would have a competitive advantage by having a better education than them. And I generally think that's true, so well done. Congratulations. The second thing is I've always really believed in a really, really steep learning curve for a couple of different reasons. The main one is I get bored really easily. And so I want to be learning stuff all the time. And I did that in every job and with every boss I ever had, and I've done it forever. You're never going to stop learning. There's so much stuff to learn out there. And this is a kind of a formal part of it, but I guarantee you I've learned a lot more since I graduated than even while I was still studying. The other thing is, I kept learning, I was developing broader skills, and I'd like to think that those broader skills were more useful to my bosses over time. So a steep learning curve was critical to me, and if I wasn't learning, it was over. The other thing that's really important is I had to be enjoying the job I was in. I had to be having fun. One of the things I've learned over the years is that life is way too short to be doing something you're not enjoying. The other reason why I say that is because it's been my experience, and intuitively it's obvious, that over time, the people who enjoy their jobs really outperform the people who don't enjoy their jobs. So whatever you do, get something you like doing. So, by the way, I'm sure you're aware of all the executive compensation stuff that's kind of swirling around right now in Washington and around the country, and some people who got paid too much, and they won't be getting paid as much in the future. Just so you know, in my 34 years of business, never once did I ever ask for a raise. Not once. Money is really nice to have, but frankly, it's never motivated me. And you like to get paid and stuff, and you want to get paid well, but it never was on my top 5 list. So I'm going to digress just a little bit and talk about when I started my first job. I was really nervous about it, going from university into the workforce, and I'm sure just as many of you are really nervous about careers that you're about to begin. So I read something not long ago from Peggy Noonan. She once said this, and Peggy's a TV commentator now, but back in the olden days, she used to write speeches for President Reagan. She said that there's a 3-stage reaction for her for working in the White House during the Reagan administration. The stage 1 was, I hope no one figures out how really stupid I am. And then she said, stage 2 was after a few months in the White House, she said, hey, I'm as smart as everyone else here. And then she recalled that about 2 or 3 months later came this final stage, stage 3, where she said, oh my God, are we actually in charge here? And I would say that 3-stage reaction may have been the defining recurrence of my career. I've had that 3-stage reaction many times, and Peggy Noonan said it much better than me. And trust me, I guarantee you're going to have a similar reaction no matter where or what you choose to do with your life, with your career. It's completely fascinating. And so, graduates, I have some news for you. Oh my God, you're soon going to be in charge. So, don't break anything, okay? You are all, of course, young, smart, well-educated. You went to an excellent school. You live in a great country. You have huge competitive advantages entering the workforce. It's really wonderful. Well done. I'm going to offer you 6 short words of advice. The first one's probably the most important. And it's, in life, I found that most people's single biggest constraint is themselves, honestly. If you don't think you can do something, it won't happen. It just won't happen. So think big and be an optimist, always, and throughout your life and throughout your career and with your family and in your business career. By the way, I've always called myself kind of a pragmatic optimist. I always try to see the brighter side of anything that's really ugly, but I'm also a realist about it because you don't want something to come back and bite you. So that's number one, be an optimist. And of course, as you would expect, I've found that people like that get ahead faster and go a lot further. So secondly, embrace change. Did anyone here ever read Machiavelli, The Prince? Show of hands, yeah? I only read it like 20 years ago. Like I took a business undergrad, which was a huge mistake in hindsight. I wish I had taken history and philosophy and stuff. But of course, Machiavelli wrote that book. It's very small, The Prince, like 100 pages. And he has a page on change. So this is like 400 years ago or 500 years ago, whenever it was. And he said, when you deal with change, and of course the book was written to train princes who were taking over kingdoms, either through force or through hereditary means or whatever. He said, when you deal with change, you're dealing with 2 camps of people. He said, the first camp are people that really, really, really don't want to do it. They are completely against it. He said, and then there's the other camp. The other camp is all the people who are really skeptical. So, unfortunately, that's true. Most people generally don't like change. So what I would say is change is a constant, particularly now versus 400 or 500 years ago. So embrace it and use it to your advantage. Third thing is always act with the highest integrity and always do the right thing. Someone taught me years ago, when you have a difficult issue, think about it being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Herald Tribune or the FT, and how does it feel when you see it on the front page? How does your decision feel when you see it on the front page of the paper? And that's the ultimate test. When it goes public, how's it going to feel? Guard your good reputation and protect it always. Work with people with the highest integrity. If you hang out with slimy people or you work with slimy people, leave. That would be my advice, because as the dean said earlier, it takes a long time to gain a reputation, and you can lose it overnight. And if you do, it can take you years to get it back. So number 4, have fun at what you do. Absolutely incredibly important. Number 5, be the absolute best at it in the world. Whatever it is you decide to do, have fun with it and enjoy it and be the best at it. And number 6, this one's critical, call your mom and dad every week. So, now, the 2 most highly anticipated words in any graduation address. In closing, I'll quote the great poet and philosopher who many of you have probably heard of, Homer. That's, of course, Homer Simpson. As Homer once said, how is education supposed to make me feel smarter? Every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain. So the point is, people, you've got really smart stuff just oozing out of your brains. And in case you haven't noticed, the world could use it right about now. Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much for those insightful comments. I could tell by the students that none of them went to sleep, and they were quite often smiling and enjoyed the comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now I'd like to present you with the Richard M. Seiert Award for Professional Excellence. Dick Seiert was the second dean of the Tepper, or the GSIA back then, second dean of our business school, and sixth president of our university.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you.